The first time he called me unemployed, it was loud enough to echo off crystal chandeliers. He raised his champagne glass, smiled like he was about to deliver something charming, and said, "Let's all raise a toast to family, and to those of us who actually have jobs." Everyone laughed. Even my sister. I didn't. I remember the exact weight of that moment, the way the laughter spread like spilled wine across white linen, the way the string quartet faltered half a beat before recovering, the way my mother's eyes flicked toward me and then quickly away, as if discomfort were contagious. I stood there in a fitted navy dress I had paid for in cash, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't touched, and let them laugh. What none of them knew, what he didn't know, was that I could have ended his engagement right there. I could have shattered the illusion he'd built with 2 sentences. But I didn't. Not yet. Because humiliation is loud. Revenge, if done correctly, is quiet. And I am very good at quiet. My name is Ava Bennett, and according to my future brother-in-law, I was between opportunities. That was the polite version he used in front of extended family. Unemployed was what he said when he wanted a reaction. Ethan Caldwell, my sister Lily's fiancé, had perfected the art of the charming jab. He would say something cutting with a smile, then follow it with, "I'm just kidding," as if cruelty evaporated when labeled humor. The wedding was set for June. This was their engagement dinner. 200 guests. Catered rooftop venue overlooking the city skyline. Custom monogrammed napkins. A champagne tower tall enough to require structural confidence. Lily had always liked grand gestures. Ethan liked audiences. I arrived alone. That detail mattered to him. He noticed everything that could be weaponized. "Still single?" he had asked when I greeted them earlier that evening, his hand resting possessively on my sister's waist. "For now," I replied. He smirked. Must be hard focusing on dating without a job schedule. Lily had squeezed his arm lightly. "Ethan." "What?" he said, laughing. "I'm teasing. But teasing is never accidental. It is testing." He was testing how far he could go. And everyone kept letting him. The truth is this, I had left my job 3 months earlier. I had been a senior financial compliance analyst at a multinational firm, the kind of position that requires discretion, pattern recognition, and a tolerance for uncomfortable truths. I resigned voluntarily. Officially, I needed a break. Unofficially, I had been recruited. I signed a non-disclosure agreement the size of a novella and began consulting independently. The work required confidentiality. It also required that I not advertise my employment status. So yes, technically, I was not on payroll. But I was far from unemployed. And I certainly wasn't dependent. Ethan, however, loved the narrative. It made him look superior. When he stood for that toast and made his little joke, I saw something shift in the room. A few of his friends chuckled too hard. His father nodded approvingly. My aunt whispered, "Oh dear," under her breath. Lily smiled tightly, the smile she uses when she doesn't want to rock the boat. I felt the familiar sensation I used to feel in conference rooms when someone lied with confidence. A pulse behind my ribs. Not anger. Assessment. Because I knew something he didn't know. I had been assessing Ethan for months. Not intentionally at first. It began as instinct. The way he avoided specifics when talking about his job. The way he dropped company names but never project details. The way he insisted he worked in strategic acquisitions, but couldn't explain regulatory differences between domestic and international mergers. I noticed details for a living. And details were off. 3 weeks ago, during Sunday brunch at my parents' house, he'd excused himself to take a board call. He stepped into the backyard. I happened to follow shortly after, not to eavesdrop, but to retrieve the dessert I'd left in the car. His voice carried. "Yeah, I know the numbers don't line up yet, but we'll fix it before due diligence," he said. Fix it. Not clarify it. Fix it. That word lodged in my mind. Later that day, when he boasted about his firm's rapid expansion, I asked a simple question. Which regulatory body oversees your compliance audits? He blinked. Depends. On what? He took a sip of mimosa. Internal structures. That is not an answer. It is camouflage. And I have spent a career identifying camouflage. After that brunch, I did something I had not done before. I looked. Public records. Corporate filings. Investment announcements. Licensing databases. Nothing invasive. Nothing illegal. Just information anyone could access. The company he claimed to be vice president of strategic acquisitions at? It existed. But his name did not appear anywhere in executive listings. Not in filings. Not in press releases. Not in regulatory documentation. Odd. I widened the search. I found his LinkedIn profile, impressive, curated, vague. I cross-referenced employment timelines with archived corporate staff directories. His supposed promotion to VP coincided with a period when the company was undergoing restructuring. In fact, 3 executives had been terminated that quarter. One of them for falsifying performance metrics. My pulse didn't quicken. It slowed. Pattern recognition. So I requested a corporate registration history report. Then a litigation search. Then bankruptcy filings. That was when I found it. A smaller entity he'd co-founded 5 years ago. Dissolved. Outstanding tax liens. Unresolved creditor disputes. Misrepresented revenue projections in investor briefings. Not criminal, but close enough to cast a shadow. And then there was the most interesting detail of all. His current employer had recently issued a quiet internal compliance review after discrepancies were discovered in acquisition projections. The review was ongoing. His department was named. He had not told Lily. Of course he hadn't. Because Ethan thrives on image. And image collapses when audited. Back at the engagement dinner, laughter still hanging in the air, he raised his glass higher. To success, he said. I met his eyes. He held my gaze, challenging. He thought I had nothing. He thought I was small. Unemployed. Dependent. Embarrassed. He had no idea that the folder on my laptop, encrypted, categorized, timestamped, contained enough truth to turn this rooftop celebration into a crime scene of reputation. But timing matters. Revelation without preparation looks petty. And I am never petty. I smiled. Congratulations, Lily, I said clearly, projecting just enough for the surrounding tables to hear. I hope your future is everything you believe it to be. Ethan's smile faltered, just a fraction. Because that sentence wasn't a blessing. It was a warning. Later that evening, Lily cornered me near the dessert table. Can you not antagonize him? She whispered. I didn't. You always look at him like you know something. I held her gaze. Do you trust him? She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Yes, she said finally. Of course I do. Then that's what matters, I replied. But trust built on illusion is fragile. And illusions do not survive exposure. When I left the rooftop that night, the city lights reflecting against glass towers, I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine. I replayed the toast. The laughter. The word unemployed. It wasn't the insult that bothered me. It was the arrogance. Arrogance grows when unchallenged. And Ethan had never been challenged publicly. Not by investors. Not by family. Not by Lily. But weddings have a curious property. They gather everyone who matters in one place. They invite speeches. They encourage storytelling. They provide microphones. And they create expectation. Expectation that everything is perfect. Perfection, however, is very easy to fracture. Especially when the fracture line already exists. I drove home slowly. By the time I reached my apartment, I had made a decision. I would not confront him privately. I would not argue. I would not defend myself. I would let him continue. Let him boast. Let him plan his carefully curated ceremony. Let him invite colleagues who believed his title. Let him stand in front of family and promise a future built on integrity. And then, when the room was at its fullest, when the commitment was about to become permanent, I would introduce a single element. Truth. Truth, when presented calmly and with documentation, does not scream. It does not need to. It simply exists. An existence is enough. The wedding was 8 weeks away. I closed my laptop, stared at the ceiling, and allowed myself one quiet thought. He called me unemployed. He has no idea what I do for a living. And by the time he finds out, it will be too late. I did not confront him the next day. I did not text Lily. I did not post anything reactive or dramatic. Instead, I worked. You want control? Then you gather evidence. You verify it. You remove emotion from the equation. Ethan believed I was idle. So I let him believe it. While he toured venues and sampled cake flavors, I expanded my file. I requested archived board announcements through public corporate registries. His name never appeared. Not once. I pulled quarterly earnings reports from his employer. The department he claimed to run? It had been downsized 6 months ago. Yet somehow, he was still introducing himself as vice president. Titles leave paper trails. His did not. I scheduled a consultation under a neutral alias with an industry recruiter who specialized in executive placements. I asked, casually, about Ethan Caldwell's professional reputation. There was a pause. Oh, the recruiter said carefully. You mean the Caldwell from Rydell Strategic? Yes. Another pause. He's not an executive. The words were simple. Clear. Controlled. He's in acquisition support, she continued. Mid-level. He was under review recently. Under review. I thanked her. I ended the call. I added the transcript to my notes. A week later, Lily invited me to a bridal fitting. I went. You show up. You observe. Ethan arrived halfway through, late, dramatic apology ready. Board call ran over, he said, kissing Lily's temple. What board? I asked lightly, adjusting the veil. He smiled at me, tight, sharp. You wouldn't know them. He wanted the reaction again. He didn't get it. I'm sure, I said calmly. He watched me longer than necessary. Good. Let him wonder. 3 days after that, something shifted. A former colleague of mine, Daniel, reached out. You consulting privately now? He asked. Yes. He hesitated. There's an internal investigation happening at Rydell Strategic. Acquisition projections inflated. Compliance flags ignored. My chest did not tighten. It settled. Who's involved? I asked. Someone named Caldwell. Why? No reason. I thanked him. I closed the call. Then I opened the folder. I created a new section. Risk exposure, personal. Because this was no longer about exaggeration. This was about potential fraud. If the internal review went public after the wedding, Lily would be legally entangled by marriage. Shared liability. Shared assets. Shared consequences. I am not emotional. But I protect my family. Even when they don't understand it. The following Sunday, Ethan cornered me in my parents' kitchen. You've been quiet, he said. I've been busy. With what? Work. He laughed. Right. You see what he needed? He needed superiority. He needed the illusion that I lacked something. I leaned against the counter. You should be careful, I said calmly. About what? Overstating credentials. It can create complications. His jaw tightened, subtle, but visible. Are you threatening me? No. I met his eyes. I'm advising you. He stepped closer. Whatever you think you know, he said softly, stay out of it. That sentence confirmed everything. If he were innocent, he would have laughed. Instead, he warned. People only warn when there is something to protect. That night, Lily called me. He says you've been interrogating him. I've asked basic questions. Why? Because I am not passive. Because I see patterns. Because you are about to legally bind yourself to a man whose resume doesn't survive scrutiny. But I did not say that. Instead, I asked her one question. If there was something you didn't know about him, something important, would you want to know before the wedding? Silence. Then, there isn't. Certainty without verification is not strength. It is denial. The internal investigation at Rydell escalated faster than I expected. 2 executives suspended. 1 public statement about irregularities in acquisition modeling. Ethan posted nothing. No LinkedIn updates. No celebratory promotions. Silence. The kind that grows heavy. Meanwhile, wedding invitations were mailed. 200 guests confirmed. Ethan insisted on a live band. A videographer. A full open bar. Image must be maintained. One evening, 3 weeks before the wedding, I received something unexpected. An anonymous email. Subject line, you should see this. Attached, internal memo, Rydell Strategic Compliance Review. Ethan Caldwell named directly. Allegation, intentional misrepresentation of projected acquisition returns to secure performance bonuses and investor confidence. My pulse slowed. Evidence. Concrete. Time-stamped. This was no longer speculative. This was structural. I printed the memo. I verified its authenticity through metadata and formatting consistency with prior Rydell documents. It checked out. Then I sat at my desk and made a decision. I would not leak it to the press. I would not send it to Lily anonymously. I would not confront him in private. Because private confrontation allows revision. Public truth does not. The wedding was in 19 days. And Ethan Caldwell was about to promise honesty and integrity in front of 200 witnesses. I closed the folder. Locked the drawer. And whispered one quiet sentence to the empty room. You should have let the unemployed girl be invisible. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ethan hosted a rehearsal dinner planning meeting at a private wine bar downtown. He invited close family, a few friends, and, deliberately, 2 of his colleagues. Image reinforcement. He wanted witnesses to his success. I arrived on time. He arrived 10 minutes late. Back-to-back calls, he announced as he removed his jacket. The acquisition's closing sooner than expected. One of his colleagues, a man named Trevor, gave him a look. Not admiration. Assessment. I recognized it. It was the look of someone who knows the narrative doesn't align with the numbers. We sat. Menus were passed around. Wine was poured. Ethan spoke loudly, easily. He discussed international strategy, capital leverage, and regulatory navigation. Broad phrases. No specifics. When Trevor asked, casually, so how's compliance handling the variance issue, the table went quiet. Ethan smiled. Internal adjustments. Nothing material. Nothing material. That is corporate language for something very material. I watched Lily's face. She didn't understand the exchange, but she felt it. You can always feel when something is off. Halfway through the evening, Ethan stood to make another toast. He likes being vertical. It gives him authority. To new beginnings, he said. To partnerships built on transparency. Transparency. The irony was almost elegant. I sipped my water and let him continue. I'm lucky to have a woman who trusts me completely. His hand rested on Lily's shoulder. She beamed. Trust is beautiful. Blind trust is dangerous. He glanced at me mid-sentence. A flicker. A challenge. Still unemployed, his eyes said. Still powerless. I set my glass down gently. When he finished, there was applause. Then Lily turned to me. Ava, do you want to say something? The room shifted. Unexpected variables unsettle people. I stood slowly. Calm is contagious. I'll keep it simple, I said. Lily, I love you. I want your future to be stable, honest, and legally secure. A few guests exchanged glances. Ethan's jaw tightened. Marriage, I continued evenly, isn't just romance. It's liability. Shared assets. Shared risk. The word risk landed. I saw Trevor look at Ethan again. Which is why, I said gently, I assume all financial disclosures have been fully transparent. Silence. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just still. Ethan laughed. Of course they have. Good, I said, meeting his eyes. Because undisclosed compliance investigations can complicate things. There it was. A single sentence. No accusation. Just fact. Trevor froze. The other colleague looked down at his wine. Lily's smile disappeared. Ethan didn't laugh this time. What are you talking about? He asked. I held his gaze. Rydell Strategic issued an internal compliance memo last week regarding acquisition modeling discrepancies. I let the words breathe. You're named. The air shifted. Trevor inhaled sharply. One of Lily's friends whispered, "What?" Ethan's face changed. For the first time since I'd known him, the confidence cracked. That's confidential, he said tightly. Yes, I replied. It is. Lily turned to him. Ethan? He didn't answer her. He stared at me. You've been digging. I've been verifying. You see the difference? Digging implies malice. Verifying implies responsibility. He stood abruptly. This is inappropriate. Inappropriate, I repeated calmly, would be marrying someone without disclosing active investigations that could affect shared financial exposure. The word shared hit Lily harder than anything else. Is it true? She asked him quietly. His silence was louder than any confession. He attempted damage control. It's minor, he said. Internal politics. They're looking for someone to blame. That's not what the memo says, Trevor muttered before he could stop himself. The room turned toward him. Trevor swallowed. There's external review now. External. That meant regulatory involvement. That meant possible charges. Lily stepped back from Ethan. You told me everything was fine. It is fine, he snapped. The snap was new. Sharp. Unfiltered. You're overreacting because she's jealous. Jealous. Predictable. When confronted with evidence, attack motive. I didn't react. I never react to deflection. I'm not jealous, I said evenly. I'm cautious. He moved toward me. You think you're smarter than everyone. I think documentation matters. We stood facing each other in a wine bar full of witnesses. He had chosen the audience. I simply changed the script. Lily's voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me? Because telling you would require honesty. Because honesty would weaken control. Because control is his currency. But I didn't answer for him. I never rescue liars. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. It was nothing, he insisted. It's being handled. How? I asked quietly. No answer. Because there wasn't one. The meeting dissolved quickly after that. People gathered their coats. Whispers filled the corners. Trevor left without shaking Ethan's hand. The illusion had fractured. Not shattered. But cracked enough to let light in. Outside, Lily stood near the curb, arms wrapped around herself. I didn't know, she whispered. I know, I said. She looked at me, really looked at me. You weren't trying to embarrass him. No. I was trying to protect you. She swallowed. Is there more? Yes. There was more. Much more. But truth is not dumped. It is delivered. I'll show you everything, I said calmly. Privately. Behind us, Ethan watched from the doorway. His expression wasn't anger. It was calculation. He was already planning his next move. But something had changed. For the first time, he was not controlling the narrative. And that unsettled him. As Lily got into my car instead of his, I saw it clearly. The wedding was no longer inevitable. It was conditional. And conditional means fragile. He had wanted a stage. He had wanted applause. He had wanted to call me unemployed in front of a crowd. Instead, he had just been publicly audited. And we were only at the rehearsal. Lily came to my apartment that night. Not crying. Not hysterical. Quiet. There is a specific kind of quiet that happens when someone realizes the story they've been telling themselves might not be true. I opened the door. She walked in without speaking. I handed her a glass of water. Then I opened my laptop. You're not crazy, I said calmly. And you're not stupid. But you do need facts. She sat across from me at the dining table, the same place where I'd organized the file for weeks. I turned the screen toward her. Everything I'm about to show you is verifiable, I said. Public record. Corporate filings. Compliance documentation. Nothing illegal. Nothing speculative. She nodded once. Bracing. First, I showed her the executive directory. His title isn't vice president, I said evenly. He's listed as senior acquisitions associate. She stared at the screen. That's mid-level. Yes. Next, the restructuring announcement. 3 executives were terminated the same quarter he claims he was promoted. Her fingers tightened around the glass. Then the internal memo. I didn't dramatize it. I simply scrolled. His name. Highlighted. Allegation, inflated projected returns. Compliance review, escalated. External audit, pending. Lily stopped breathing for a moment. He said the review was routine, she whispered. It isn't. She looked at me. Could he go to jail? Possibly, I said calmly. If intentional misrepresentation is proven. You don't soften that. You don't exaggerate it either. You state it clearly. She stood abruptly and walked toward the window. The city lights reflected against the glass. He told me we'd buy a house next year, she said quietly. He said bonuses were coming. Bonuses based on inflated projections. I didn't say it. She understood now. That's not all, I continued. Because partial truth protects no one. I opened another document. Bankruptcy filings from his previous company. Tax liens. Investor complaints. All of this predates you, I said. He has a pattern of overstating performance to secure funding. She turned slowly. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I needed proof, I said. Accusations without documentation would push you closer to him. That is human nature. Defend the person you love. Reject the person who challenges them. I wasn't trying to win an argument, I added. I was trying to prevent damage. She sank back into the chair. Her hands trembled slightly now. Does Mom know? No. Does anyone else? Not yet. And then I delivered the part that mattered most. If you marry him while this investigation is active, you assume shared financial exposure. If regulators issue penalties, assets acquired during marriage are vulnerable. Her eyes widened. Our accounts. Yes. Debt? Yes. She covered her mouth. Not dramatic. Just stunned. Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, she asked, "Why does he hate you?" It was the wrong question. "He doesn't hate me," I said evenly. "He resents scrutiny. Men like Ethan thrive where no one checks them." "I check." "He called you unemployed because he needed you smaller," she said slowly. "Yes. That way you couldn't challenge him." "Yes." She exhaled shakily. God. No theatrics. Just clarity arriving. Her phone buzzed. "Ethan." She stared at the screen. Didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then again. Control slipping creates urgency. "I need to confront him," she said. "No," I replied firmly. "You need to observe him. There is a difference. When you ask about the memo, don't accuse. Don't reveal what you know. Watch his reaction." She nodded. "What if he lies?" "He will." "Then what?" "Then you decide whether you want a husband who lies under pressure. Simple. No drama. Choice is power." She left just after midnight. But before she did, she turned at the door. "If this is true," she said quietly, "the wedding is over." "It's not about being over," I replied. "It's about being informed." She studied me for a long moment. "You really aren't unemployed, are you?" I almost smiled. "No." The next morning, Ethan showed up at my building. Unannounced. Anger makes people impulsive. I met him in the lobby. Public space. Controlled environment. "You went too far," he said without greeting. I presented documentation. "You humiliated me." "No," I said calmly. "Your compliance department did." His eyes flashed. "You think this is about integrity?" he snapped. "You've always hated me." "Hate is emotional," I replied evenly. "This is procedural." That unsettled him more than anger would have. He stepped closer. "You don't understand how business works." "I understand exactly how it works," I said quietly. "And how it collapses." He paused. "Assessing." "You showed her everything." "Yes." He exhaled through his teeth. "You just destroyed her wedding." "No," I corrected. "You jeopardized it." He stared at me for several seconds. Then he said something that told me everything I needed to know. "She'll come around." Not, "I'll fix it." Not, "I'll explain." "She'll come around." Because he assumed her loyalty was automatic. Unconditional. Permanent. Arrogance again. That evening, Lily met him. I did not attend. I did not listen. I did not interfere. I waited. At 11:42 p.m., my phone rang. She was crying now. Not hysterical. Just heartbroken. "He lied," she whispered. Of course he did. He said the memo was fabricated. Then he said it was exaggerated. Then he said everyone inflates numbers. There it was. Normalization. Minimization. Deflection. And when I asked if there were other issues, she continued, "He said you were manipulating me because you're bitter about your own life." Predictable. Attack motive. Did he deny the investigation? I asked. No. Silence. Then. He told me not to postpone the wedding because it would make him look guilty. That sentence was the fracture point. Not because we love each other. Not because this is temporary. Because it would make him look guilty. Image over integrity. Every time. The next morning, Lily called the venue. She didn't cancel. She postponed. Publicly, it was labeled unexpected professional complications. Privately, it was clarity. Ethan called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. He sent one final message. "You've made an enemy." I stared at it for a moment. Then I typed one sentence back. "You made yourself one." And I blocked him. But this wasn't over. Because compliance reviews escalate quietly. And when they escalate, they don't just affect reputations. They affect charges. And charges don't care about wedding dates. They care about evidence. The external audit report was due within days. And when it arrived, it would not be internal anymore. It would be official. He had wanted a stage. He had wanted applause. Instead, he was about to receive something far less forgiving. Documentation. And documentation never laughs. The external audit report was released on a Tuesday morning. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet corporate disclosure filed at 9:12 a.m. By 9:18, it was circulating internally. By 9:27, I had a copy. And by 9:31, Ethan Caldwell's future changed. I read it once. Then twice. Clear language. No theatrics. Findings. Deliberate inflation of projected acquisition returns. Manipulation of performance modeling to secure internal advancement. Failure to disclose risk exposure to Oversight Committee. Recommended action, termination. Referral for regulatory review. No ambiguity. No spin. No room for interpretation. At 10:03 a.m., Lily called. He was fired, she said, voice hollow. Yes. They escorted him out. Of course they did. Companies protect optics when misconduct is confirmed. How did you know? She asked. I track patterns, I said calmly. Silence. Then, he's saying this is sabotage. By who? She didn't answer. Because there was no one left to blame. By noon, the story leaked. An industry blog picked it up first. Then a larger financial news outlet. The article didn't mention Lily. It didn't mention the wedding. It mentioned Ethan Caldwell, Senior Acquisitions Associate, terminated following confirmed financial misrepresentation. Mid-level. Not vice president. That correction alone dismantled years of exaggeration. At 2:14 p.m., my mother called. I saw something online, she said carefully. Yes. Is Lily safe? Yes. That was all that mattered. Ethan called me at 4:02 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Another. Finally, I answered. Not emotionally. Just evenly. What do you want? You did this, he said immediately. No. You've been digging for months. I verified public records. You turned her against me. You turned her against you. Breathing on the other end. Ragged now. You think you're righteous, he snapped. You've ruined everything. I let the silence stretch. Because panic fills silence. Everything built on deception collapses, I said calmly. That's not sabotage. That's consequence. You could have come to me. I did, I replied. At the rehearsal. He didn't respond. Because he remembered. He had laughed then. He wasn't laughing now. By evening, Lily had packed a suitcase. She wasn't dramatic about it. No screaming. No scene. She simply removed her ring, placed it on the kitchen counter, and left. He tried to stop her. He tried to pivot. Promised explanations. Promised corrections. Promised lawsuits against the company. But the illusion had already fractured. And once someone sees the crack, they cannot unsee it. 3 days later, regulatory authorities announced a formal inquiry. Not criminal charges yet. But enough. Enough to ensure his professional future would be limited. His LinkedIn profile changed that week. Vice president disappeared. Then senior associate disappeared. Then the profile went private. Control lost. Narrative collapsing. I saw him once more. Outside a cafe near my apartment. He looked smaller. That's what happens when image dissolves. You're satisfied? He asked. I'm relieved, I said. For what? That Lily found out before signing legal documents. He laughed bitterly. You always thought you were better than me. No, I said quietly. I just pay attention. He studied me for a moment. Then he asked the question he'd been holding since the engagement party. What do you actually do? There it was. The thing he'd dismissed. The thing he'd mocked. I met his eyes. I identify financial risk, I said calmly. And I eliminate it. He swallowed. Because now he understood. He had never been superior. He had simply been unexamined. The wedding was officially cancelled the following week. Deposits were lost. Guests were informed. Public statement, irreconcilable differences. Private truth, exposure. Lily moved into a new apartment 2 months later. She began therapy. She began rebuilding. And slowly, she began trusting herself again. One evening, she came over for dinner. No tension. No fragility. Just quiet strength returning. I keep replaying that toast, she said softly. Where he called you unemployed. I smiled slightly. He underestimated the wrong variable. She shook her head. I almost married him. Yes. But I didn't. No. She looked at me carefully. You didn't destroy him. I held her gaze. No, I said. He dismantled himself. A few weeks later, I received a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was the engagement invitation. On the front, someone had written in black ink. Should have kept your mouth shut. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I placed it in the shredder. Threats are loud. Documentation is louder. He had called me unemployed. He had laughed. Everyone had. Until they didn't. And the most powerful part? I never raised my voice. You think the story ends when the wedding is cancelled. It doesn't. Exposure is an event. Consequences are a process. 3 weeks after the regulatory inquiry became public, formal charges were filed. Not dramatic ones. Not headline-grabbing indictments. Financial misconduct. Intentional misrepresentation in acquisition modeling. Civil penalties pending further review. But in his industry, that was enough. No executive position. No board seat. No acquisition role. Reputation in finance is oxygen. Once contaminated, it doesn't recover easily. Lily didn't celebrate. She didn't feel victorious. She felt tired. That's what disentangling from deception feels like. Exhaustion. One night, sitting across from me at my kitchen table, she asked quietly. Did you ever want to hurt him? No, I wanted the truth to be visible, I said. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional. Accountability is structural. And structure is what I work with. Ethan tried to regain control in other ways. Mutual friends received selective versions of the story. I was targeted. My projections were misunderstood. Her sister has always hated me. Some people believed him. Some didn't. That doesn't matter. Truth doesn't require unanimous approval. It requires documentation. And documentation was already filed. 2 months later, the civil penalties were announced. Fines. Professional suspension. Mandatory disclosure on future financial applications. In other words, permanent record. The kind that appears during background checks. The kind investors see. The kind future employers verify. The kind fiancés should know before signing marriage licenses. I ran into him one last time at a professional networking event. Irony has timing. He wasn't on the guest list as a speaker anymore. He was attending. Quietly. He saw me before I saw him. You're everywhere, he muttered when we crossed paths near the bar. I work in compliance, I replied evenly. That's how it feels. He looked thinner. Not physically fragile. Just diminished. You think you're clean, he said. I am. And perfect? No. Calm. Direct. But I don't falsify projections. Silence. He studied me. Then he said something almost honest. You never liked that I called you unemployed. No, I said. I didn't like that you underestimated me. He looked away first. That detail matters. The first person who looks away concedes. Later that evening, Lily texted me. She'd started a new job. New apartment. New routine. I'm embarrassed I didn't see it sooner, she wrote. You don't punish someone for learning. You support them. Trust isn't weakness, I replied. It just needs verification. Months passed. The headlines faded. His name stopped trending in industry forums. But records don't fade. Records persist. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't scream forever. It just stays. Quiet. Accessible. Permanent. One afternoon, I received a call from a former Rydell executive. I heard you were the one who connected the dots, he said. I verified public filings, I replied. We need people who do that, he continued. There's a position opening in forensic risk assessment. I smiled slightly. Not surprised. Patterns reward attention. I'm listening, I said. 6 months after the engagement dinner, the night of the champagne toast, Lily and I stood on the same rooftop venue. Not for a wedding. For a charity fundraiser. She wore a black dress. Confident. Unburdened. Halfway through the evening, someone asked her what happened to the wedding. She didn't flinch. It didn't align with my standards, she said calmly. That's growth. Clear. Concise. Unapologetic. As we stood near the railing, city lights below us again, she nudged me. He really thought you were unemployed. I looked out at the skyline. He confused silence with weakness. She laughed softly. He picked the wrong sister. Yes, I said. He did. Because here's the truth. He didn't lose Lily because I exposed him. He lost Lily because he built a future on fabrication. I just turned on the lights. And when the lights came on, everyone stopped laughing. There is one final detail you should understand. I never once insulted him publicly. I never raised my voice. I never attacked his character without evidence. I presented documentation. That's it. When someone calls you small, you don't argue your size. You reveal their scale. He called me unemployed. He made a room laugh. And in the end, the only thing unemployed was his credibility. People expect explosions. They expect screaming matches. Courtroom drama. Public apologies. That isn't how collapse usually works. Collapse is administrative. 8 months after the cancelled wedding, Ethan's regulatory inquiry converted into a formal industry sanction. Not prison. Not handcuffs. Worse, permanent restriction. He was barred from holding fiduciary responsibility in acquisition structuring. That sounds technical. It means no one serious would trust him with money again. And in his world, trust was currency. I didn't celebrate. I didn't comment. I didn't post a single thing online. Because the point was never humiliation. It was prevention. Lily had started seeing someone new by then. Not intense. Not dramatic. Just steady. The first thing she told him about herself? I don't ignore red flags anymore. Growth doesn't shout. It adjusts standards. One evening, nearly a year after the engagement dinner, my parents hosted a small anniversary gathering. Close friends. Wine. Soft music. No spectacle. Ethan wasn't part of our orbit anymore. But his absence was noticeable, not because we missed him, but because tension had left with him. Midway through the evening, one of my father's friends pulled me aside. "You work in compliance, right?" "Yes. My firm just discovered internal projection manipulation. I could use someone who isn't afraid to ask uncomfortable questions." I nodded. "I'm not afraid. That's the real difference. Most people see something wrong and hope it corrects itself. I see something wrong and verify it. That's not aggression. That's responsibility." Later that night, Lily and I stood on the back patio. "You know what I keep thinking about," she said. "What?" "That toast." I smiled slightly. "You mean the unemployed one?" She nodded. "I remember feeling embarrassed for you." "I wasn't embarrassed." "I know that now." She looked at me carefully. "You weren't hurt, were you?" I considered the question. "No," I said honestly. "I was observing. That's what people misunderstand. If someone underestimates you, you don't collapse. You collect information. You assess. You wait." A week later, I received a message from Ethan. Not angry. Not threatening. Just brief. "You were right." I read it once. Then I deleted it. Closure doesn't require response. Accountability doesn't require applause. Here is what changed after all of it. Lily asks harder questions now. My parents don't ignore subtle discomfort. I no longer tolerate performative arrogance in shared spaces. And when someone makes a joke designed to shrink another person, I don't laugh. Because laughter protects bullies. Silence protects dignity. Documentation protects truth. The final irony? 3 months after his sanction, Ethan tried to rebrand himself. Consulting. Strategic advisor. Motivational posts about resilience. Image reconstruction. It almost worked. Until someone in the comments linked the regulatory report. That's the thing about public record. It follows you. Quietly. Permanently. If you take anything from this story, take this. When someone tries to make you small in front of an audience, they are testing your boundaries. You do not respond emotionally. You do not beg for respect. You do not defend your worth. You gather facts. You let them build their illusion. And when the timing is correct, when witnesses are present and documentation is verified, you introduce reality. Calmly. He called me unemployed. Everyone laughed. Until they didn't. And the loudest sound in that rooftop venue was not my voice. It was the silence after the truth landed. That silence? That was accountability. About a year after everything collapsed, Ethan tried to rebuild. New title. New website. Strategic advisor. Image reconstruction. It almost worked. Until someone linked the regulatory report in a comment thread. That's the thing about public record. It doesn't argue. It just exists. And once something is documented, it follows you. I didn't interfere. I didn't monitor him. I didn't leak anything. But fragile reputations crack easily under fresh scrutiny. 3 weeks into his new role, investors questioned projection inconsistencies. Again. The pattern hadn't changed. And patterns always resurface. Lily, however, had changed. On early dates, she asked direct questions. What's your financial history? Any past investigations? Is your title accurate? Some men laughed. She didn't continue seeing them. One man answered calmly, with documentation. She kept seeing him. Transparency feels different. It doesn't resist examination. 2 years after that rooftop toast, I spoke at an ethics conference. Most fraud begins as tolerated exaggeration, I told the room. Silence. Not awkward. Respectful. Afterward, a young analyst approached me. My fiancé jokes about my job in public, she said. Stop laughing, I replied. You teach people how to treat you. She nodded. That was the real shift. Not his downfall. The cultural adjustment around him. He once called me unemployed to make himself look larger. What he didn't understand was this. Impressive people seek applause. Competent people seek accuracy. I seek accuracy. And accuracy doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be correct. By the third year, Ethan wasn't a headline. He was a footnote. A failed consulting page. A vanished partnership. A comment under an industry article. Isn't this the guy who got sanctioned? Reputation doesn't explode. It erodes. Quietly. Meanwhile, Lily changed. She didn't harden, she refined. On dates, she asked direct questions. What's your debt situation? Have you ever been investigated at work? Is your title accurate? Men who laughed didn't get a second date. The one who answered plainly became her partner. That's growth. Not dramatic. Disciplined. Years later, I returned to that same rooftop as a keynote speaker at an ethics conference. The same skyline. The same lights. Different audience. I want to talk about risk that hides in plain sight, I said. The room went still. Misconduct doesn't begin with crime. It begins with tolerated exaggeration. Heads nodded. Because they recognized it. Afterward, a man introduced himself as VP of Strategic Growth. I asked which firm. He hesitated. That's all it takes. No confrontation. Just clarity. Ethan never scared me. Inflated confidence always folds under steady scrutiny. He once told me I thought I was better than him. No. I just verify. And verification is patient. 3.5 years after that toast, I stood on the same rooftop again. This time for Lily's wedding. Small. Intentional. Calm. Before the ceremony, her fiancé handed my father a folder. Financial disclosures. Voluntarily. No ego. No resistance. That's integrity. It doesn't flinch under examination. During the reception, Lily asked me to say a few words. I stood. Marriage isn't built on grand declarations, I said. It's built on verified trust. The room was quiet, not tense, but solid. To honesty that holds up under scrutiny. Glasses lifted. No spectacle. Just certainty. Later, Lily joined me by the railing. You didn't destroy him, she said. No, I replied. I refuse to protect the lie. That's the truth of it. When he called me unemployed, he was trying to define my value publicly. That's shallow power. You don't respond to shallow power with emotion. You respond with timing. You document. You wait. And when truth enters the room, laughter stops on its own. He made a joke. They laughed. I said nothing. And in the end, the only thing unemployed was his credibility.